All right, here we are for another edition of the Field of 68 Mid-Major Show. I'm Sean Paul, joined by my co-host Rocco Miller. We're going to talk about a lot this episode. It's going to be four games this week that are teams ranked highly in Rocco Miller's top 60, which you can find on his Twitter every week at Rocco Miller 8. We're going to discuss some of the best transfers to the D1 level that were non-D1 players last year, some of the best coaches that have come to their new school. Just a lot to cover this week, and we're going to get going with some of the games that you need to be paying attention to this week, starting with Drake against Bradley on Wednesday. Drake has lost two games in a row, one against UIC on the road, which I called a couple weeks ago on the same show. Murray State, that was a bit of a surprise. I mean, I don't think many people saw that coming, but Murray State was able to hit some big threes late. Bradley, they have been really good this whole year. They've been the best shooting team in the country. They were able to pull that game out against Indiana State in Terre Haute. Somehow, that was a game that Indiana State probably should have won in overtime. They were up 7 with 2 minutes left, but Bradley was able to clutch it out and pull out a game winner with Duke Dean getting the layup. So this game is going to be interesting. It's at Bradley. So what are you expecting from this one, Rocco?
Yeah, it's an interesting can of worms. It's been circled since I think the Charleston Classic ended, Sean, after Drake came out of there with a Vanderbilt win and some other high major wins, and they've only added to it going into league play with that Kansas State win, the game I was at, and great call by you as Valley play did get going, and they fell to UIC. Again, a matchup nightmare there, not able to handle the UIC bigs and never really got any momentum going there. And then it spilled over to a home game with Murray State, as you mentioned. So you're now going to see Drake I think at their most prepared, on high alert. But going to Bradley's not easy. The last time Sean Bradley lost a home game was February of last year against a very different Drake team led by Darian DeVries. So Bradley themselves, a lot of those guys are back from last year. All they're going to see is the name Drake on the front of the jersey, and they're going to be hungry, very, very hungry. And
Oh,
the fans, as you and I know, are very hungry all the time. It's going to be an awesome atmosphere. I think overall, schematically, Drake's really got to clean up the turnovers. It's been an issue all year. Really hurt them in the Murray State loss specifically. And then, can Bradley maintain that number one 3-point shooting percentage, or is some regression due? Obviously, if you're a Drake fan, you're hoping they start cold so you can grind one out late, as Drake's been so good at doing. So I would say if it ends up being a wide margin for Bradley early, they're in great shape to run away with it. But I do think if Drake can keep it tight, I like the Bulldogs to pull it off in a close one if it can stay close.
yeah, it's interesting. To me, I always kind of want to go with the home team in this kind of spot, but Drake, they are motivated. I mean, coming off those two losses is going to be something that I'm sure Ben McCollum was not happy with. He didn't look very happy on the sidelines. And that's a guy that's a proven winner. He's won multiple national championships at the D2 level. But what this one comes down to for me is, like you said, Drake's turnovers, 19% turnover rate when you play the slowest tempo in the country. That's just not going to lead to a lot of wins. I mean, you don't see the Virginia teams that were winning the national title playing that kind of tempo, turning it over almost 20% of the time. I mean, it's hard to win games when you're turning the ball over that much. But you also look at their defense. I mean, 1.12 points per possession for Murray State. Like, you can look on the surface and be like, okay, they only allowed 66 points, but when you chop it down to the points per possession, it isn't great because Drake's going to play slow every game, so they're never going to allow like 90 points. But when you cut it down to points per possession, it really stands out that their defense did struggle in these games, 1.25 against UIC. Like, they just weren't as good defensively as they were earlier this year, and maybe some of that is the UIC bigs. Maybe some of that was Murray State's shooting. And also, Isaiah Jackson didn't play against Murray State. I don't know what his injury situation is, if he'll be back for this one or not. But if he's not there, that's another piece of depth that Drake does not have. Isaiah Howard, a freshman, really stood out against Murray State, came off the bench. But Drake, if they're able, or if Bradley's able to shoot the ball well from three with Duke Dean, who's been awesome all year, with Zeke Montgomery, who's been a really good transfer ad coming back from Rhode Island, Christian Davis has had a really strong season. They just have a lot of pieces, and that's going to be a big thing in this one. I think Bradley's going to be able to pull out the home win, mostly because they're at home. If this game was at Drake, it might be a different story. But I just have a bit of concern with how Drake could be able to defend their 3-point shots, their turnovers, their depth. I think Bradley just has a little bit more in this matchup.
Yeah, they certainly got the edge on paper. I think the big X factor again is Drake coming off the pair of losses, and so
Hmm.
you're going to get their best for sure. But Bradley just might be superior with the shooting, and if Drake does start getting a little sloppy with the ball, it could actually be a blowout, which would be wild to see. But again, like in tight game situations, just being at the Drake Kansas State game, time and time again, Drake came
Hmm.
up with the big play. They prefer to run it through Bennett Sturts. He's got the sure-handed, and he's tough. He's a tough matchup at 6'7" to guard at the top of the
Hmm.
key. So I think you'll see a lot of that down the stretch. The problem for Drake has been they want more ball handlers in the mix throughout the 40 minutes of the game, and that's where the opponents, Bradley in this case, can start to maybe take advantage of Division two skill level with ball handling.
On Thursday, this is another interesting matchup that I'm not sure that many people had circled in the preseason, and it's South Alabama, who's sneakily 11 and 4. They are 4 and 0 or 3 and 0 in league play, and the way they've won all of these games in league play, it was a 28-point win against James Madison. They allowed 49 points. It was a road win against Georgia State where they won by 26 and allowed 51 points, and it was a road win against Georgia Southern where they won by 29 points and they allowed 47 points. So as you can see, Richie Riley's squad is defending at a very high level. And South Alabama, they started the year 0-1 with a loss to Central Michigan. After that game, they were 250th in KenPom. Right now, they are 108th in KenPom. So almost a 150 spot jump since November 8th. South Alabama has been just scalding hot. They have been shooting the ball a lot from three, not shooting it super well, but Miles Corey has been a huge piece for them. They're turning teams over at a very high rate. They're winning the turnover battle in just about every game. So, what are you expecting in this game as South Alabama faces a preseason favorites in the Sun Belt, Arkansas State, who's fresh off a loss at James Madison?
Yeah, South Alabama, they're one of the smallest teams in terms of average height in the country. You'll see their starting lineup, 6'8", Elijah Ormiston's the tallest player, and then only Barry Dunning at 6'6". Then it gets smaller and smaller from there, but they've just got a really good amount of production from new guys. John Broome has been an incredible freshman.
Not to be confused with Janai Broom.
Correct. Even
Yeah.
though they're in the same state, which is interesting. But you also have Miles Corey, who we'll talk about later. He's just had an unbelievable year transferring up from Jessup, an NAIA school, and playing like an all Sun Belt player so far. So it's the combination of the press and the different traps. You saw, John Broome, very athletic, four steals in that Georgia Southern win. But I mean, the fact that they've been doing this over and over again. We just saw James Madison knock off Arkansas State. South Alabama, right here in the Mitchell Center, decleated JMU, and now Arkansas State's got to come to the Mitchell Center. So hopefully for the folks in Mobile, they're paying attention. I know the Senior Bowl's coming soon, and that's what Mobile's all about. But take some time to go to the Mitchell Center and see these guys on Thursday night because Arkansas State's Sean and I agree the clear favorite in the league. They've already got a loss now because, like I mentioned, they lost to JMU. And we'll see if South Alabama's for real. They went to, in non-conference play, they had a disappointing home loss to both Central Michigan and Western Illinois. But they've obviously cleaned a lot up. And they played TCU fairly tough in a low-scoring 9-point loss. And it's been sky's the limit since then. So, we'll see if the trend can continue. They will have a nice – cushy Old Dominion matchup on Saturday, so they'll be putting all their eggs in the Arkansas State basket this week.
What would be your pick in this game? You got to make a pick.
I got to make a pick.
Have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think Arkansas State's skill level should be able to overcome a lot of the traps and presses, but if you haven't seen it before, that could catch them off guard. I'll be bold here and take South Alabama to stay hot.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to see what the spread will be on this game. KenPom has it as actually South Alabama favored by one, which I definitely didn't see happening in the preseason, but only
Yeah.
18 spots separate the two teams in his rank, or 14 spots separate these teams in his rankings, and being home is obviously an advantage for South Alabama. But for me, what I'm looking at here is one, Kobe Julian hasn't played in 3 games, so if he doesn't play in this one, I don't know what his injury situation is either. Is it not good?
Yeah, I don't know. I think
You
he's
don't know either.
up in the air. They're not saying much, which means could be out a while, could be
Yeah.
back. Yeah, you know how
And
that
he's dealt
goes.
with a lot of injuries in his career. So anytime you see like a guy like that who's like had, I think he's had multiple medical red shirts, like you really begin to wonder, like, is this dude going to come back soon? Hopefully, because he's such a big piece for this team. I mean, he was the Sun Belt preseason player of the year for a reason. But the thing I'm looking at here is South Alabama, they play Georgia Southern, they play Georgia State. Those are two of the bottom teams in the Sun Belt. Facing Arkansas State is going to be a totally different animal. And the
Yep.
James Madison win was huge. James Madison is a good team. They've been okay this year. They got that win against Arkansas State, but that game was also at home. So obviously South Alabama will also be at home. But also Arkansas State just doesn't turn it over that much. They're going to look to play a lot faster than South Alabama, a team that's going to really slow it down. And Arkansas State has some size. I mean, they can go a lot of different ways here. They have Isaiah Nelson and Rayshad Marshall, who are splitting time at the five. Marshall is more of a 6'8", like burly, bruising big man, and Martin Nelson is that athletic 6'10" big man who was really good for them last year. Then you have DeAndre Dominguez, who's versatile at 6'8" at
Yeah.
the four spot. They just have
I
so
like
many
him.
different options they can go to. So Joseph Pinion's been shooting the ball well. Taryn
Yeah.
Todd is their best player so far this year. I think it's going to be a little bit too much talent for South Alabama to overcome here. I mean, at some point, you can't turn everybody over 20 plus times a game, and I just don't think they're going to be able to turn Arkansas State over like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I think if it was a 7 game series, I'd take Arkansas State like in six.
Mm,
But I think with it being, a quick turnaround, I think the good news for Ark State, they are off a loss. So you should
mm,
like with the Drake example, you should see a very sharpened up Red Wolves team with or without Julian. And again, still more weapons overall than South Alabama. But the way South Alabama's playing, when you're playing with a trapping press style, that is all about effort and confidence,
mm.
and that just accelerates from one possession to the next. And if they start off with like a 10-0 run or something, which is what they've been doing in these last three conference games, it just might be such a big snowball effect that Arkansas State can't recover. That's what I'm interested to see. I want to see those first couple segments, up until maybe that third TV timeout. Can South Alabama build a double-digit lead by then? If not, then yeah, you're probably right. Arkansas State will find their way and make a move in the second half. But it's going to be an awesome chess match, I think, between Riley and Hodgson.
Yeah, and credit to Richie Riley. I mean, I don't. This team on paper is not close to being the most talented team in the league. It's probably not a top five most talented team in the league, but they've just been able to figure it out. And every single year, I mean, Richie Riley and his staff go and finds a guy from the non D1 level that ends up being their best player. Like this year's Miles Corey, last year was Isaiah Gator, the year before was Isaiah Moore. Like they just keep finding guys from the NAIA, the D3, the D2 level that just fit really well in that system that probably wouldn't be the number one option at a lot of schools, but they build their offense around these guys and it ends up working. So credit to them. And speaking of teams that were non D1 guys previously, UC San Diego, a team that is now eligible for the NCAA tournament for the first time. Maybe they have a shot at an at-large bid with that win over Utah State holding a lot of weight. I really wish they hadn't lost that game against Seattle because we would be having a much different conversation right now. But the Tritons on Saturday facing UC Irvine, number 63 in Ken Palm's ranking against number 65 in Ken Palm, which is the Tritons, number one and number two in Rocco Miller's rankings. Are you going to be there? I feel like this is the kind of game you'll be at.
I'm working on the final details, but
Okay,
I
see.
I would say greater than a 50-50 chance. Stay
See,
tuned.
I just had a feeling. We have not even talked about that, but just knowing you, that's a game you're going to be at.
It's a yeah, and the funny thing is I was the announcer for Irvine's tournament. I covered the
Hmm.
UC San Diego tournament down in Daytona Beach that they won. So I've already seen these teams play three times apiece. But one of the things that came from both of those results was that I can't wait to see these teams play each other. So
Hmm.
here we are, Sean.
So what are you expecting from this one? I mean, you have 7-footer Ben
Yeah,
Leutchten, who's been awesome against UC San Diego, who's not the biggest team on the interior.
right. Yeah, that'll be fascinating. I think I have to preface this with a really interesting Thursday night. UC San Diego will host Cal Poly, which again, in most cases, UC San Diego would wipe the floor, and they sure might anyway. Cal Poly's been all over the place. They just had to go to Hawaii, and it's going to be tough. But Cal Poly is just so scrappy and
Hmm.
won't quit. They're going to fight all 40 minutes. That's an interesting tune-up game, I think, for
Can't
them.
look
But
ahead. I mean, you really can't. If you
yeah,
have any
that's how
chance of
good
getting an at large, you can't lose that game.
right. So you got to keep your eye on how that plays out. And then I think even more interesting is Irvine's road test on Thursday. They go to CSUN, and CSUN is on fire right now. I would argue the most athletic team in the league with Keontae
Yep.
Jones
Yeah.
and a loaded roster. If Irvine's not careful, they certainly can't look ahead. Maybe
No.
San Diego, UC San Diego can a little bit, but Irvine certainly can't. So we'll see how those play out. Assuming they can both survive, that sets the stage for Saturday. Hopefully, we get mostly healthy teams. The other thing to watch is Andre Henry's missed the last few weeks for Irvine, and another situation where we're not hearing much about his status. I watched him on the bench on their win over Riverside on Saturday. He had his full warm up suit on, limping around a little bit. It's one of those. He could be out another month. He could be back on Thursday. So
What's the injury? Is it like
it's something with his leg. I don't even
okay?
want
So
to guess.
I feel like with those, like they'll either be back next game or we'll see him in a month and a half. Like I feel like we never
Right.
know.
And I think the most important thing about Henry is, in my opinion, especially after seeing them in Canada 3 straight days, was he's their lockdown defender. He's the guy. Russell Turner says, go guard that best player as long as it's a 1 through 4. And Henry can play 1 through 4. He's just a big missing piece from that standpoint. Not the biggest scorer. They have their Tillis, they have their Leuchten, they have their Justin Holm when they need buckets. Miles Che's been really scoring a lot lately,
Yes.
kind of filling that void. But yeah, so they've become more offensive as you saw with the Belmont game. But you saw in the Duquesne loss that UC Irvine became their defense got quite a bit weaker. And I think that's what they're trying to overcome. They'll certainly need as much defense as possible to slow down that UC San Diego buzzsaw. And I think that will be a key element of the game. I'm also curious to see, the Tritons haven't had this big of a home game in their D1 history. I think the San Diego State game at
I'd
home was
argue that game was pretty big last year, though.
it was, but Big West game, certainly the
That's
biggest
true.
Big West
What
game.
that was the Jaden Ledee game winner too, right? Last year
It
in that.
was that
Yeah.
one
See.
pointer, yeah, one
Yeah.
point game. So yeah, I'm excited for the community of La Jolla and the city of San Diego. I hope they pack that place Saturday, and I hope I'm there too. But I think, yeah, I mean, UC San Diego is just the better team right this minute,
Yep.
especially without Henry. But I mean, that is exactly what Russell Turner and UC Irvine want you to say.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
if he's watching this episode, Russ, you want to be the underdog because they love that chip on their shoulder. It's going to be an incredible game.
I mean, that underdog toughness, that grittiness, that's exactly what Russell Turner has built this program on and the consistency that they've had year in, year out. I mean, they're 17th in Ken Palm's defensive efficiency, but similar to some of the other teams we've talked about on this episode, like a Drake, who is a really good team. They have a style that they're going to play every game. UC Irvine's a lot faster paced than them, but they also turn the ball over a lot,
Yeah.
19% of the time. And that's not what you want to do against this UC San Diego team, who is one of the best at forcing turnovers in the country. They force turnovers 25% of the time. And like you said, the community, they're going to be up for this one. I mean, this game is going to be, I assume, sold out. It's got to be, it's got to be close to that. If it's not, this place is going to be packed. And UC San Diego, I mean, those guards are really good. And Niwa Tate Jones, it's taken me like a year and a half to figure out how to say his name. He's not a shooter from three. He doesn't take very many, but he's just so crafty, he's so skilled. He just seems to know the
So good.
angles, make the right play every single time. You've seen him in person a ton. He just always
Yeah.
makes the right play. Tyler McGuy is shooting 41% from three. Hayden Gray, another guy that can really hit it from outside. It just comes down to how they're able to contain Ben Leuchten. He's a monster. I mean, he's finally hit that breakout. He's finally healthy. But I think from top to bottom, especially if Andre Henry doesn't play, this UC San Diego team just has the upper edge right now. And we've seen just how good this team can be. I mean, they almost beat San Diego State this year. That was a 5 point loss on the road. They beat a really good Utah State team that's nationally ranked. And if they
Yeah.
didn't have that slip up against Seattle, they're probably top 50 in Ken Palm. They might be ranked themselves. So, UC
Right.
San Diego, this is a really good team, and I think this is a game where they're going to win at home.
Right, I agree. And I think the really amazing thing, I was thinking about this earlier today, is UC San Diego at the start of the year, they gave San Diego State that battle on opening night. They led with about 6 minutes to go. I think that's where the confidence started, even though they lost.
Hmm.
And even at the tournament I covered, They were in a seesaw battle the first game against LaSalle. They could have easily lost to LaSalle. They get through that with a win. They play another grinder the next day. I think it was against James Madison.
Mhm.
And James Madison's got talent. They get through that. So I think these wins are just constantly snowballing into more confidence. These guys are, a couple of guys are former D2, lower level basketball players that
A
came to
lot of them.
UCC.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them. So there's no egos here. It's all
Mhm.
cohesion. It's a different flavor. You got some international flavor in here too, but like the parts are just forming so perfectly on a team level that's hard to break at this point. The way they're playing, they had a 50-point lead with about 4 minutes to go on the road at Fullerton on Saturday night.
It's not
That's I
bad.
mean
Yeah, it's not bad.
that's crazy. I mean, Fullerton's one of the best coach teams in this league, and it speaks to how dialed in they are as a
Mhm.
team, like finding the open man, moving without the ball, all these little things that seem obvious to say out loud. It's a lot easier to say than actually do. They just do it.
They execute it. It's a lot
Yeah,
easier said than done. Like, but when you
it's
can do
inherent.
it against anybody, I mean, they had Utah State. Like, I was watching that game. Like, okay, Utah State's going to make a run at some point, and they just never did. So when you're able to have a team who's at home with a really good home crowd, and they silence the home crowd, I mean, they just had nothing going for them that entire game. That showed me. I already knew that this team was good. You already knew this team was good, but when that game happened and we
Yeah.
saw the upside of what this team could be, we're like, okay, this is a little more than just a good Big West team. This could be a really scary team that you're probably going to want to circle on any brackets if they get there.
Yeah, and now because of the Utah State win, and because of the fact that Utah State went on to win at San Diego State and win at Nevada and win at St. Mary's, Utah State's way up the charts
Hmm.
in bracketology at this very moment. And that's got UC San Diego. It's like a rising tides lifts all boats scenario with the transitive property there. That UC San Diego's road win in the Spectrum, if they end up being the only team that wins there this year, they've got a real case for an at large if they fall short in the Big West tournament. And that's incredible for a team. Keep in mind, this is their first year eligible for the
Hmm.
tournament after just finishing transition. So just a lot of incredible stories coming out of La Jolla. Also, the arena there, Lion Tree Arena, they hosted the Rady Children's San Diego tournament that had Purdue and BYU and
That's
Ole
right. Yeah.
Miss. It's a beautiful place to watch a game. So anyway, they'll hopefully get a good spotlight for this game, even though it's on ESPN Plus, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, you if you're watching this show, I'm assuming you have ESPN Plus because that's where a
Oh,
lot of
oh,
these games are.
apologies. It's on ESPNU, so that's great
Okay,
news.
okay, okay. Now we're talking. So
Now we're
you should have it
talking.
anyway. So it's
You
nationally televised. If you're not
tune in.
watching, yeah, if you're not watching, I don't know what you're doing. But another one on Saturday. If you see me looking at my phone here, so my computer doesn't crash from pulling up Ken Palm again. So let's look at Saturday. It's Louisiana Tech. They're heading on the road, or no, Liberty's heading on the road to play a Louisiana Tech team that just got beat up this week. I mean, they lost to New Mexico State. They lost to UTEP. This was a team that I called the best mid-major team in the country a good month and a half ago. Obviously, that has not continued to be the case. And, if I can admit when I'm right, I can admit when I'm wrong. And so far, that has not held up. Liberty, they lost a game as well, a close one against a really good Western Kentucky team. Then they went and beat Middle Tennessee by 10. But Richie McKay is one of the better mid-major coaches in the country. Doesn't matter where they're playing, they're going to be up for this game. They have another tough one against Sam Houston State, but Louisiana Tech, they are reeling right now. They need to win in the worst way. What do you think's gonna happen in this one?
Yeah, it'd be interesting, Sean. I mean, the way Louisiana Tech performed, being down 25 at half at New Mexico. Now, obviously, life's way different on the road than it is at
Mm,
home. And Louisiana Tech plays in such a very tough to get to location in Ruston, Louisiana, up in the northern western part of the state. So it's they have a great home court advantage. Not an easy place for Liberty to get to. Liberty is going to start this week. I believe they're playing at Sam Houston.
mm.
So they'll be coming
Another
over
tough one.
from. Yeah, I mean that's just a tough prep after Sam Houston on the road. So some built-in advantages for La Tech. They open with FIU on Thursday night to start the week. So those are just things to keep in mind leading into Saturday. But if La Tech can get right against FIU, I think they're in great shape to come back and get back to 2-2. Of course, sitting at 0-2 right now, not where anybody expected them to be. And last year they played Liberty. I believe it was. Did they play in the conference tournament? No, they did
I
not.
can pull it up.
They did not.
They did
So they
not.
split. Yeah, they split in the
Yeah,
regular
Liberty
season.
lost to UTEP in the conference tournament. So
Yeah, they this game last year at La Tech went to OT. It was a really good game. It was a heartbreaker for Liberty because it was the situation, but in reverse, because Liberty started shockingly 0-2 last year, and that sent them to
that's
0 and
right.
3.
Hmm.
So now Liberty's got a chance to return the favor. That's an interesting storyline as well.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's interesting because you look at what Louisiana Tech has right now, and without Will Jeffries, they're a little bit thinner on the interior. Obviously, they have Daniel Baccio, who's just a monster. I mean, he's going to dominate against anybody, but Liberty obviously knows that, and, the way that Liberty plays, they're going to really try to make things difficult on Daniel Baccio, and they have Owen Aquino, they have Zach Cleveland, they have a lot of size. They don't have Isaiah Enan, who I think is out for the year, so without him, that's a little bit of a
Right.
knock to their depth. And their guards are really good. Caden Matheny and Colin Porter, those two can really stroke it from the outside. But on the flip side, they aren't very big. They're both 5'10", 5'11", and one of them's probably going to have to guard Amari Abram, who's 6'4". So that's a big size advantage on Louisiana Tech's side.
Yeah.
Obviously, Liberty's going to want to slow it down. They're going to want to shoot a ton of threes. So if they're not able to shoot it well from the outside, that's a big thing in the favor of Louisiana Tech. And this game being at home, that's a big swing factor for me here because I think these teams are evenly matched in a lot of ways. Liberty's obviously a little bit better right now, but on the road, Louisiana Tech is obviously going to be very up for this one. Sam Houston is going to give Liberty a very tough fight because that's a good Sam Houston team. I think this is a good spot for Louisiana Tech to get their first CUSA win.
It is a good spot. And I think what it'll come down to is effort and energy. And you hear rebounding based programs, starting at the very top with Houston and on down. We see a lot of these types of teams in mid major ball too. If you offensive rebound and rebound harder than the other team, where Louisiana Tech has a clear advantage, as you mentioned,
Hmm.
in rebounding, that actually breeds energy and execution on things like shooting and just playing overall better as a team. So I think that'll be the key. Like, how much effort and energy will they give early on and just dominate the glass? Because that will get the crowd excited. That will make the team play better. They'll feed off that energy. And La Tech's got a real chance to do that with a great start. But if they're a little like they did not bring any of that energy,
No.
especially in the New Mexico State game. I thought the UTEP game was a really good battle for
Mm.
about certainly the first half.
That's a tough
And
team
then
too, though.
yeah, exactly. And then UTEP eventually outwilled them late, but La Tech's got to bring energy if they can. Then I agree they can win this game, and probably should win this game. They certainly need to because they don't want to let Liberty get another game on them in the standings.
Mm. No, that's gonna be a good one, as all four of these games are. So we'll revisit our predictions on next week's episode. But let's go
Absolutely.
back to a little bit of things from last week, and let's talk about our teams of the week. We're gonna pick two each. So Rocco, I'm gonna flip it over to you here. What are your teams of the week from last week?
Sure. And I'll use this opportunity at every chance I can to highlight a team that is probably not talked about much or totally forgotten about in some cases. And in this case, we had a 6-9 Omaha team heading to the state of North Dakota. A tough place to get any kind of wins in the Summit League. Not only did they get a win, they got both,
Two.
and that's really difficult to do. Part of the reason they did it was they took care of the ball. They only had 5 turnovers at North Dakota State. North Dakota State and North Dakota, of course, their bigger weaknesses are defense. So it was a good chance for Omaha to exhibit great offense, but we hadn't really seen it at this level. I think that win against Cal Poly they had right before the holiday break gave this team confidence. It really showed, especially offensively. Both games very high scoring, 95-85 over North Dakota, 85-80 over North Dakota State. But it was one of those weeks where everything was clicking. They shot it really well from deep. They had really good shot selection and few turnovers. If Omaha can do that, they'll continue to play spoiler in this league. I don't know if they're good enough or consistent enough to compete for the league title, but they are 2-0 so far, with Kansas City coming to town on Wednesday. So that'll be a game to keep an eye on.
A very hot Kansas City team, and Markel Sutton, he's been an absolute stud for Omaha. But my first team of the week here I'll go with is going to be UNC Asheville. And You look at what that game was against High Point. That's High Point, who was the preseason pick in the Big South, and they still might be the best team in the Big South, but they have some clear defensive problems, and UNC Asheville was able to exploit that. Jordan Marsh was terrific, the transfer from App State, who was like a six man last year for a really good App State team. Mike Morrell was able to pull him out of the portal, and he's been awesome. I mean, he was just dynamite in that game. He was getting to the mid range. If High Point was hard hedging, he was finding a way to get past it. If they were playing drop coverage with Bodo, he was getting to the mid range and scoring. He went over 3 from 3, but he was tossing dimes left and right. He even had a play late in that game on like 7 minutes left. He was inbounding the ball, passed it off of Kamani Hamilton's back, grabbed it, and got the layup. Like, that was just the kind of game that Jordan Marsh was having. And you look at him, you look at Toyaz
Awesome.
Sullivan, who's been just incredible. I didn't know he had that kind of game in him. He's 15 points a game this year. Josh Banks, who's been great. They just have a great trio. Fletcher Abee's been playing really well. High Point's the deeper team and probably more talented from top to bottom. But that trio is going to carry this UNC Asheville team a very far way in the Big South.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it because that was such an awesome story overall. Just the fact that Asheville's first Big South home game after
Hmm.
everything
Yeah.
the community had gone through the last 3 months. Your interview with Coach Morrell,
Hmm.
beating the big dogs of the league right out of the gate doesn't get much better than that in terms of
No.
where they're at. They obviously have been trying to just find themselves with all the chaos. And that's going to be big time for them going forward. I had an opportunity earlier today, Sean, to speak with the league office, James Holland, one of the assistant commissioners, and he's excited, but he was also saying that High Point is a team that would help the league nationally if they could stay in the front. So that's clearly not going to happen now. But I think on the flip side, you're going to see such a great league race. High
Hmm.
Points looked human in their losses now to Norfolk, although that's non-league, and Asheville. And you see how tough and competitive like Radford's win over Winthrop was. I think he made a point that every Big South game so far, the home team has won. So
Wow. That's interesting.
we haven't even seen a road team win in this league yet, and that's going to create some great environments and it makes everybody feel like they have a chance. So I think that's cool, honestly, from a top to bottom standpoint.
Yeah, I mean that's a big one, and another team from the state of North Carolina is going to be your second team of the week. So why don't you get into them a little bit?
I want to stay in the UNC system. I couldn't help myself. So UNC Greensboro, we're going to the SoCon where we do have teams winning on the road, including this Spartans team. They started a conference playoff on New Year's Day. If you were too hungover to watch, I don't blame you. But if you were able to open an eye or two, this game was on early on CBS Sports Network. I was ready to roll, fired
Not
up.
hungover.
No, not really. Actually, I was feeling good. So, yeah, minor miracle there. We'll take it. But yeah, like that was a great game, seesaw battle, and I thought they did a great job pulling that thing out late, 68-66. And Wofford, of course, has a lot of experience. They had just gotten right before the holidays a big road win at St. Louis. So Wofford had all the confidence in the world, and I was really impressed with the Spartans to be able to get that done. And it's still a team, we're trying to learn a lot about some new guys this year under Mike Jones. But then the big game came Saturday, Furman in town, and Furman on fire. Only one loss all year. They've been in the top 5, top 6 of my rankings for the last several weeks. And UNC Greensboro did not care about any of that.
Mm-mm.
Uh, Kenyon Giles was absolutely sensational. He had 25 points. The team was ridiculous from deep, shot 12 for 23 from three. And it was just an all around great effort for UNC Greensboro, who really created a lot of separation early, up 10 after 10 minutes, and then stretched that thing out and won this game by 17 points. And so, as you look at the SoCon, we know Samford is likely still the favorite, just the way Buckyball plays, and they can wear you down. But another game we didn't even get a chance to get to is UNC Greensboro gets a crack at Samford coming up on Saturday on the road.
I mean, UNCG, they have been very impressive so far. Kenyon Giles, Donovan Atwell, Ronald Polite, those three can really shoot. And Demetrius Davis making an appearance here. He was really solid in this one. Former Chattanooga big man But what was most impressive to me is they won a more defensive oriented battle against Wofford. Then they're able to go shoot the lights out against Furman, who had been one of the better defensive teams in the mid major scope so far this year. So we saw them win a game in different ways. And to me, if you're a team that's able to do that, you're a team that has some staying power atop your conference. So that was a really impressive one to me. And the second team of the week that I'm going to go with here is going to
Yeah.
be Murray State. The way that they're just able to go and get that road win over Drake was one of the more impressive wins I've seen so far this year. And this Murray State team, they've traveled. They went to the Diamond Head Classic. They had some close games in that one. They came out with one win, I believe. But overall, just the way that they were able to win this game, like there was moments where they blew that lead. I believe Bennett Sturz had an and one. The game was tied. Then Terrence Harcum makes a contested three, and Jacoby Wood gets an and one. They just had so many different things go in their direction with their guys that are veterans, with Harcum, with Wood. Those are two really good players that dictate a lot of what happens for this Racers team. And this, when this program is good, it's good for whatever league they're in because they are a brand name. They had that win in the NCAA tournament many years ago that got them on the scope, and then they had John Morant, and he was able to lead them to a tournament win. They've just had this. They're good for college basketball. They're good for mid-major basketball when they're good. And Steve Prohm, he was really good his first run there. It's been up and down so far, transitioning to the
Yeah.
Missouri Valley. And quite frankly, he needed a season like this. And he's a good dude. I mean, he was on the Field of 68. I did a show with him one night on After Dark back in the day. So Steve Prohm's a really good dude. I'm glad to see him finally get a huge win returning to Murray State. And let's see if the Racers are able to build upon this and compete in a really stacked Missouri Valley Conference race.
Absolutely. That's a great shout out. I mean, they earned it. They probably pulled off the biggest upset on paper
Mm,
when you look back on the week, just based on Drake was number one in my poll last week. They lose a home
yeah.
game to a team that's probably middle of the pack, Missouri Valley on paper. So that's big time for their program. And Murray State Nation, they needed something to cheer about. They have one of the best fan bases in all of mid major basketball. They pack the place. And I think their next couple games, watch out for that home crowd. I think they'll be juiced up.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot to be excited about because this is an experienced team with a lot of talent. And that win was huge. So let's pivot a little bit here. We're gonna get into some first year coaches that have been killing it at their respective locations. Let's start out with Rocco. This was your idea. I love this call by you in the pre-show process. So where are you going for this question?
Yeah, so I really just want to, throw out some shout outs. We're at the midseason point practically now, and we're in a sport now where you can flip your roster in 1 year, and you're
Mm,
almost expected to with NIL, transfer portal, et cetera. Certainly at the highest level you are, and in the mid-major level, if you're at a great program like a Western Kentucky, for example, who has Hank Plona or Chris Mack over at Charleston, who's already in first place in the CAA. You kind of expected that. They have great resources for those leagues. By comparison, those coaches had incredible pedigrees. Plona's example, he got to stay at WKU. He was there with Coach Lutz in the previous regime. So shout outs to those guys for that. I also thought a situation where Cornell came off of a great year, and John Jakes, he's a Cornell lifer. He played in the NCAA tournament, helped take Cornell to the Sweet 16 Merrickley in 2010, and now he's the head coach. It's a great story, but he knows Cornell basketball inside and out, and he's been able to maintain that sucker. As we get into Ivy League play, watch out for them. I got to see them here at Cal, put on a
a
show at
good
Cal,
one. Yeah.
and they beat them. Yeah, so but I'll start it off just with like some early, first year head coaches of the year candidates. Don't necessarily need to pick an award today if you don't want to, but I think the obvious award would go to Ben McCollum of Drake, just
Yeah.
based on all the success winning the Charleston Classic, beating Kansas State, all the other undefeated, one of the last teams undefeated in the country, et cetera, et cetera. But I think a less obvious one is Ethan Faulkner, who got the job at Youngstown, promoted after Mr. Jared Calhoun went to Utah State. And one of the really fascinating things is, they struggled early, had that double overtime game against Syracuse, didn't pull it out. But as soon as the lights went on for league play, this was a different animal. They started off beating both Robert Morris and Oakland by double digits each earlier in December. And they carried that forward to a 5-0 start later, spilling into this year. They finally just took their first loss to Purdue Fort Wayne after an 8-game winning streak. In between all that, they also beat Toledo. They beat Wright State, a conference win. So I've been really impressed defensively. They've got a 7'3" kid they brought in named Gabe Dines, who's
Hmm.
just been ridiculous. I think he's like the nation's leading shot blocker right now. And it's altered like opposing offenses to crazy degrees. Not only him, but also just the way they communicate and play team defense. It's something that Calhoun cleaned up a little bit last year. And now Faulkner, being I think the defensive coordinator last year, now the head coach, has really doubled down on that. And they do it all while playing one of the fastest tempos in the Horizon League. So major shout out to Youngstown State and Coach Faulkner. I think just if they can win the regular season crown, big if, because they have some great competition in that league. He might actually be the mid-major coach of the year by the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a great job, and a big thing, I mean, with the portal, he did a great job. EJ Farmer from Toledo, he's done a great job there. Jason Nelson from BCU, Ty Harper, who was a well-traveled individual that ended up at the NAIA level, then get him at Youngstown State. He had a big dunk the other day. I forgot what game it was, but he had a big dunk when I was watching that one.
Yep.
They've just done a really good job in the portal and it's translated to a lot of on-court success. And two coaches that have also done quite well in the portal are going to be UIC's Rob Eisen, who added a ton from the portal and obviously has that big win over Drake, has a road win over Illinois State under their belt as well. And they added
Yeah.
Sasa Siani from Xavier, and he's been great. He was great in that game against Drake. He was dominant on the offensive glass. Tym Freeman, who has been really solid for them. Javen Jackson, who's been their leading scorer this year. He was a transfer from Utah State. They've just added a lot of pieces that were solid pieces at their previous location. Not the number one guy by any means, but they've all just been a good sum of parts for this UIC squad that looks like they could really pull off some upsets in the Missouri Valley. And the other one, I don't think they're going to win their league by any stretch of the imagination, but similar to Hank Plona, I think Jeremy Schulman has done a really good job at UT Martin, and I think that could lead to a lot of teams deciding to go that JUCO route for their head coach. I mean, Plona's done a really good job. He was an assistant at Western Kentucky before, but he was a JUCO head coach at John A. Logan for a long time, or not John A. Indian Hills for a long time. He coached Ty and Grant Foster. He coached Curtis Jones, who's one of the better six men in the country at Iowa State. Like, this is a dude that coached a lot of talent. He knows talent. So I'm expecting a lot of good things for him moving forward at WKU and wherever else he may end up. And then Schulman, I mean, UT Martin, they lost so much from last year. They lost Jordan Sear, they lost Cruz to the portal. So the fact that he was able to retool the way he has, Josue Grulone has been really good, another JUCO guy. I think most of that team, like 11 of their 13 players, were born in other countries. Like, he just went in different directions to assemble this team. Overseas, JUCO, D2, D3, not a lot of D1 transfers, and it's translated to some success in OVC play so far. So a lot of credit to Jeremy Schulman for what he's been able to do.
Yeah, that's a great shout out. I think they've been the great wild card in the league because they've had a couple just incredible performances where they've
Mhm.
blown out their opposition. They knocked off Little Rock, I think, last week. So, uh, yeah,
They
they're
lost that game
definitely.
at the buzzer.
Oh, they lost that game at the buzzer.
Yeah,
Sorry
they,
about
they
that.
didn't score for like the final 13 minutes. They didn't get a field goal
Okay.
for the final 13 minutes, I think. So they
Well,
almost won.
that just goes to show they are the great wild card of the league. But they're definitely going to be dangerous throughout the year. I've been really intrigued by that team. A couple of quick ones before we get on to the next subject is, teams not necessarily in contention to win their leagues, but just incredible turnarounds already in the making. These are more like 2 to 3 year rebuilds versus the teams with resources to just go build a roster right away, like the ones we mentioned earlier. So I'll start with Detroit Mercy.
Yep.
Mark Montgomery. I mean, oh my goodness, they've got
Yeah.
five. They've got five D1 wins already, including a road win at Ball State, who, by the way, is in first place in the MAC right now. And they also have two Horizon League wins, which has already doubled last year's total. And I think the more important, impressive part is some of these wins. Mark Manciel was going to be one of their best players by far, and Mac Manciel, I should say, and he's only played 4 games. He's out for the season. They've
Hmm.
had three other guys banged up, and I think one of them might be out for the year as well. So he's got a really thin team right now, and they're still right in there in these games. Just beat Robert Morris last week in OT, and they fight every night. Look at their scores if you don't believe
Hmm.
me.
Yeah.
They're in almost every game, and maybe just to a slightly lesser degree, Paul Corsaro at IU
Yeah, that's
Indy.
a great call. No, great call.
Yeah, I mean both those teams are not slouches. They're both better than Green Bay, so they've got that going
That's
for
not
them.
that's not saying much right now, but
But hey, they're not at the bottom anymore, and
yeah.
that's a great start in year one for both of those programs. The other one I wanted to call out is Ivan Thomas over at Hampton. They're 102 spots higher in Ken Palm right now than they were last year, and I think a lot of that has to do with Thomas's ability to recruit. He's got great connections in the DMV. He's almost a perfect fit for Hampton, being where they're located. And they did start they did have a couple brutal tough games last week, losing to Charleston and Elon, so a little bit overdue. But before that, they were 8-5. They beat up Howard pretty badly right before New Year's Eve. They beat Duquesne, of course, down in the Paradise Jam. They've got a road win at UMBC. So for where Hampton was and where they are now, a very competitive CAA team, that's not only good news for Hampton and their long-term trajectory, but it's also really good for the CAA, who had a lot of dead weight in the past. This is a competitive Pirates team.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll give you a Hampton name to pay attention to. Daniel Johnson, a freshman guard from Chicago, 8 points per game
Yeah,
and around 13 minutes per game. Hard to find better efficiency than that in the minutes you're playing. 6 shots per game, 50% from the field, 40% from three. He's earning more minutes game by game. He had 22 in
yeah,
that loss to Charleston, 18 against
yeah,
or 15 against Elon. He's starting to get more minutes, starting to get more shots. He might end up being their leading scorer by season's end in league play, at least because Noah Farrakhan is going to lead them for the season. But Daniel
yeah.
Johnson could end up being that guy for Hampton when it comes down to it. So keep an eye on him as we progress later in the season. You ready to get into some newcomers?
Let's do that.
All right, why don't you kick it off with your all Rocco Miller newcomer team? Let's just go with all five for you first.
All right, I'll be fair. I got probably first picks here because I sent mine over to Sean before I
He
knew what
did,
he was
yeah.
going to do, and these guys are all sensational. I'll admit. So I'll start it with the obvious pick, in my opinion, which would be Bennett Sturts coming from D2 Northwest Missouri State. We aim here to find guys that were not in D1 last year for this
Hmm.
exercise. So I think that made it a little extra fun.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
Bennett Sturts, yeah, Bennett Sturt's the clear leader of the Drake Bulldogs. The key, the ball needs to be in his hands when the game's on the line. I've definitely seen enough, and he's well on his way to all MVC honors, in my opinion.
A little
He
bit more than that, probably. I mean, come on, you got to player of the year, right?
He's player of the year right now, yeah. So we'll
Yeah.
see. Yeah, Drake's got to stop slipping up,
Yeah, that's
but
true.
that's my only concern is if they get it, to the top of the league or not. But Bennett Sturts is a good place to start. And then I'll go back over to Liberty with Owen Aquino. He's a Spanish transfer from Eastern Florida State JUCO, and this guy has just been all sorts of rock steady. And he's brought some of that needed athleticism we talked about early in the season that Liberty was missing last year at 6'8", 230 pounds. Not only is he playing just a highly efficient brand of basketball and one of the better rebounders in the Conference USA so far, but he's doing everything across the board, stuff in the stat sheet like crazy. He's a 63% shooter from 2-point land, and it's his first year of Division I basketball. It's really, really impressive, and it's not like he took like a lot of the guys that come from either JUCO or overseas. It takes them a while to get ready. I think JUCO alone got this guy ready because he
Oh
was
yeah.
the he was the most valuable player in that first week back when they played Valpo in Seattle, and he's carried that forward all year long. He's coming in right now as an All Conference USA player per Ken Palm. A very impressive start to the year. Next, I'll go to Jameer Simpson. This is more of a wild card out of Southern Utah University in the WAC. They just had a game where they really pushed Grand Canyon all the way to about the 5-minute mark. It was tied, and then they couldn't close, lose by 11 late. But Simpson's been the big story of the year for this club. He had 13 in that particular game, but I think overall in the season, they've had to run a lot through him. He's been pretty efficient, and by and large, He's been at 6 foot two, 6'5", 205. He's had to play everything from the 1 through the 4 position for the Thunderbirds, and really kind of an unknown guy out of Division II Wisconsin Parkside. That's the same college where Rashid Bello came from last year at Purdue
Okay,
Fort Wayne.
okay.
One of my,
Little
one of
deep
my
cut
favorite,
there.
yeah, one of my favorite players, Rashid Bello. So I've got my eye on Simpson. He's in position right now to be an all WAC player. He's had let's see, I'm just going to count real quick. 8 games over 20 points, including 28 in that Loyola Chicago
It's not
game.
bad.
And they took Loyola Chicago to the horn when they were healthy. So I think Southern Utah, despite their 5-game losing streak right now, with Simpson and others in the mix, a lot of new pieces, I think they could get to the top of the WAC. Not the top,
Wow.
but the top half. The top half.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say you're
Not the
dethroning
top.
Grand Canyon already. You
I
got
got
two
two
more
more to
though.
go. I
Yeah,
got 2 more to go. We got to go back to South Alabama. I think this one's a layup
yeah.
with Miles Corey. I brought him up on previous shows. Came in from NAIA level Jessup. We brought him up a little bit earlier in our Arkansas State game preview. But Corey, he's been awesome as a 6 foot, thunderbolt fast player. He's eighth in the Sun Belt and steal rate, but he's all over the place in terms of finding his teammates. He got a really good assist rate, 38% in conference play. So keep your eye on Corey. He's just been a huge piece of this Jaguar puzzle as they've started to find some newfound domination and success. Keep your eye on him, especially in that Thursday blockbuster. And last but certainly not least, a guy I finally got to see in person, Jamichael Stillwell of Milwaukee, just a tenacious rebounder. He was at Butler JUCO last year, and I think he started in D1, but he's back. And Stillwell is not like the biggest guy in the world, but he's got like Dennis Rodman like rebounding mentality and skills. But he's got the ability to finish as well. And I know that I was at his best game of the year when he had, I think, 18 and 18 or maybe 18 and 19.
It was
But
1918 or 1819. I remember that specifically because I tweeted about it.
yeah, it was crazy. But you see what he did against Detroit Mercy last time out. He gets another 13 boards, no big deal, another 11 points. And so with guys like Folks and McKee and Pullian, who are tremendous spark plugs, but small, Stillwell was the perfect piece for this team. Congrats to Bart Lundy for finding him. And I like what Pratt brings off the bench. They have Darius Duffy next to him in the front court. It's a great mix. But Stillwell's effort and relentlessness is, again, on theme with what we talked about all show. It's generating more energy on the court, which leads to more winning.
I mean, yeah, just a damn good evaluation there by Bart Lundy. I mean, the just ability to find that guy who's able to fit in nicely next to those guards. And I tweeted about that performance you talked about, and I was like, these are some Dwight Howard prime numbers we're seeing from
Yeah,
Jamichael Stillwell. And then he tweeted a picture of him next to Dwight Howard at me like 5 minutes later. So, I mean, hey, maybe he
I
learned
missed
something from
him.
Dwight Howard. Yeah. So, he's putting up those Dwight Howard numbers. He's not Dwight Howard in terms of building an entire NBA franchise around him, but he is a very good player who plays with that just tenacious, rebounding, tough. He's just kind of guy you want to root for. But now getting into my list, this is an interesting one. One of them I will say I kind of cheated on, but that's okay. That's fine. We can cheat sometimes. So Jackson Money is going to be my first one. He
Yeah,
was like the clear front runner for Summit League Player of the Year in my eyes prior to North Dakota State starting 0-2 in conference play with losses to St. Thomas and Omaha, but he's just been a stud. I think he has a chance to get like a two-way NBA deal. That dude's just so versatile. He's a
it's so good.
great passer. He's athletic. He can handle it super well with his size. He can shoot it. He's just a monster. He had a great game against Santa Clara earlier this year in a win there. So I think a lot of teams really missed on this guy because he can play at that level. He can play
Oh
the high
yeah,
major level. I bet a lot of teams are really wishing they had that dude right now, but North Dakota State will get the benefits of that. Owen Kuntz, he's a guy that started at the D1 level. He was a walk-on, I believe, at Colorado, but he's been
yep.
Cal Poly's leading scorer so far this year. He came with Mike DeGeorge from the D2 level, so that was a great find for him. He's been awesome. So he's just carried over what he learned from DeGeorge at the previous location at Colorado Mesa, carried it over to Cal Poly, and he's been great. The one I'm going to say I kind of cheated on is Jaron Pierre, who's the third leading scorer in the country right now, Jacksonville State. He did
Yeah,
technically play at the NAIA level last year. Yeah, I don't think he played the whole season, but He was enrolled at an NAIA school last year, so he does qualify in my eyes. He did play at Wichita State previously, did play at Southern Miss previously, but that wasn't last year. We're looking on to the future here. He's at Jacksonville State now, and he's been awesome. Just an electric shot creator. Yeah, it was a great ad for them. He's been awesome. So
He
he
looks like
has to
a,
be on this list.
yeah, Sean. I was just going to say I covered him in the Daytona Beach tournaments, same
Hmm.
one that UC San Diego won, and he to me he looks like a professional player. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
he's just so dynamite with the. I mean, the ball just comes out of his hand so effortlessly, and his dribbles are so smooth.
Mhm.
He's a really good individual player.
Just built to score. Just one of those dudes
Yeah,
like you put the ball in his hands and he's going to go get a bucket somewhere. And
yeah.
that's exactly what Jacksonville State needed. And the last two I'm going to go with, Nick Anderson. I forgot exactly where he came from. I think it was the JUCO level, but let's double check that real fast. But he's at Prairie View A&M. He has been terrific so far this year. Let's see. Last year, Nick Anderson was at um, I still can't find it. So, but he was definitely not at the D1 level last year. That's what I know for sure. And he's been great for Prairie Views, averaging 18 points per game so far this year, 47% shooting. He had 19 in the game against UCLA. He had 20 in a game against Loyola Marymount, which they nearly won. 21 in a really close game against Mississippi State that I believe they led at halftime. So, yeah, he's been around.
Yeah. So Sean, he came from Division III St. Thomas of Texas. Uh,
Not St. Thomas, the Tommies,
not,
the St. Thomas of
not our
Texas.
St. Thomas, no, down deep St. Thomas in
Wow.
Texas.
Okay,
So yeah,
that's a good pull then.
he stayed close to home at least, but that was a heck of a find. And
Yeah.
he averaged 16 and a half at the D3 level, so I guess he wasn't popping enough for most D1 programs to have
That's kind of
interest.
crazy though. Averaging 16 at D3 and he's just going to go average 18 at the D1 level, drop 20 against
Yeah,
top 25 team, drop 19 against another top 25 team. That just goes to show like if you look hard enough, you're going to find dudes. Like there are dudes everywhere, even at St. Thomas of Texas, which I didn't know existed until like less than a minute ago. And the last one, another guy that was definitely not highly recruited, I would say, is Andrew Cook at Eastern Washington. Last year, I believe he was also a D3 kid. I looked this up previous. He was at Carroll College. That might be an NAIA.
NAIA. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was at NAIA school previously, so a couple NAIA players on here, but he's just that kind of dude who's gonna be in the YMCA in 20 years and find a way to get buckets. He's not a great shooter, but he just is strong. He finds ways to score. Good mid-range scorer, good driver. He just does a lot of things well. He's been an awesome find for Eastern Washington, a team that
Yeah.
lost virtually their entire team to Washington State because that's where David Riley went. So the fact that Andrew Cook has been able to do what he's done so far this year has been really impressive, and he's been clearly one of the top 10 players to transfer from the non D1 level.
And playing in Dan Monson's system, as you saw
Hmm.
all those years with Long Beach State, if you're an offensive scorer, averaging 21 points a game at Carroll College,
Yeah.
not a bad place to land with Dan
Mm.
Monson. Keep
Yeah, and I
shooting.
mean, last year, like Riley Minix, he's in the G League right now, I think, but he was at Morehead State and he was
Yeah,
awesome all year. Like he was an
he's so
NAIA
good.
kid for sure.
Yeah.
So if you look, you're gonna find dudes. That's what we've learned.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about NAIA is they can still get scholarships. My nephew played football at NAIA level, so learned that process. But in D3, you don't. You're paying your way.
That's
So
weird,
you can,
actually. Yeah.
yeah. So if you find some kids from lower income situations, they're probably better. Certainly going to take that NAIA offer over a D3.
Mm.
So just an interesting difference. And in D2, you might get more limited scholarships too. So there's certainly some talent buried there. And NAIA actually has a really cool national tournament. I think every year it's in Kansas, or at least it used to be. So I would imagine there's, especially for mid-major programs, you're sending an assistant coach to that thing
Oh, you
every
should. Yeah.
year. Yeah, good
Yeah.
talent.
Yeah, and like JUCO too, like now I still really have no idea what any of that ruling means. I'm gonna be completely honest because I think everybody gets more years now. I really don't know. I guess we'll find out eventually.
Yeah,
But if
it's
that's the
not
case, then
settled.
that's huge.
Yeah, it's not really settled. I think there's a dilemma between, if you play JUCO, your clock doesn't start until you get to D1, so it could just make guys be older and older. But now they're starting to limit it to like 6 total years, and then you get your
Yeah,
window.
I
So we'll
see. I
see how
don't
it shakes
care.
out.
Like, what are we
We'll see
doing
how it
here?
shakes out.
Yeah, like everybody's getting paid anyways. Everybody's
Right.
gonna be like 26. Who cares? Like that's where I'm sitting at this
Yeah.
point. I don't care if they did it in 8 years. I don't care if they did it in 9 years. We have the kid who was at Miami that played like 9 or 10 years in football. Like just let them play till they get their 5 or 6 years or whatever, and call it quits. Like we don't need to be waiting. Oh, they have 6 years to make this happen. Whatever. Like just let them play what they're gonna play.
Yeah, I think the point overall that they're trying to find the balance for is if you give guys up until they're 22 to 24 years old, like we just experienced with the COVID year these last few years, you're going to see a cleaner game as a whole. So, in
Yep.
these last couple seasons, you look at all the college basketball data, top to bottom, turnovers are down, free throw percentages are up, overall 2 point and 3 point percentages are up. And what does that mean to the fine folks at Turner and CBS? It means better quality basketball.
Yep.
More people want to watch it. It's aesthetically pleasing. And Sean, I'm not going to take words out of your mouth, but I'm assuming that's why you don't mind how old these guys
Yeah,
get if it's good
I don't care. Like it
product.
means nothing.
Yeah.
I don't care
Yeah.
if you're 27. I don't care if you're 26. It doesn't matter. Like I know that some people have like a borderline meltdown when they're like, "Oh, here's four dudes that were 25." I
Yeah.
really it doesn't mean anything to me. It really doesn't. Like if you're playing like these aren't like 35-year-old dudes with families of five who are going to work at the steel mill and they're going to play college basketball. Like they're enrolled in school. They're still doing their thing. Like it's not that big of a deal to me. I think it's better for the sport, and what's better for the sport, I think is better for everybody. So
Yeah, it's certainly a better product. I guess the only counter argument for real would be if you're a parent of a 18-year-old and he would have otherwise been easily getting a scholarship and now he can't because these older
that's
guys are
fair.
taking the spot. But that's the only other argument I can really see. Otherwise, I think you're right. As a whole, it's a better product, and the sport can go further with that long-term trajectory.
Yeah, but that'll just about do it for this episode. I think we touched on a lot of topics. I think this was a really
Yeah.
productive episode for us all. So, anything else you want to get on before we leave here, Rocco?
I just think there's going to be some incredible matchups across this level. I think every team we brought up has a big game this week,
Hmm.
so stay locked in. I'll get a midweek games to watch out soon on Twitter. But besides that, enjoy it. It's going to be over before we know it. It's all about the journey, not the destination. So each of these weeks in January, February, before we get to March, take it all in.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. You can find that Games of the Week on his Twitter at RoccoMiller8. You can find me on Twitter at SeanPaulCBB. If you're still listening, like and follow and subscribe and all that on the podcast feed. Like the video on YouTube. Do all that stuff because we appreciate any feedback, any questions you have. Maybe we'll do like a Q&A at some